Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm coming at you with another video as a follow-up to my video in July about RDNA2. A little fun fact, this is the second recording of this video due to some new information that just came out today. So I decided I was going to give you guys the most accurate information possible and therefore am re-recording this video. Now, a few things before I get started. A few things that you may notice is I have upgraded both my microphone and my recording software so that there are higher quality audio, at least on the videos, that will make the experience a lot better for you, the viewer. So I hope that helps. I'm going to be continuing to tweak these settings and improve the audio ever so slightly throughout the videos. So if you have any advice, please leave that in the comments down below. Another thing, just to cover some of the business here before we get started, I've changed the channel name to Graphics Zone. That will be permanent. When I launched this, I wasn't really set on a channel name yet, so now I have that chosen and it sounds good for me and I'm happy with it. So I am going to keep that name, so now you can find me at Graphics Zone. That will be the final name for this channel. Before we get started with the video, I just want to say that I want to be as considerate as I can of your time, and as usual, I will be including timestamps in the description down below, so you can search through those and find exactly what you want to hear in this video if you don't want to spend your time watching the entire video. Now let's get on with it. Okay, so before we really go through all the RDNA2 content in this video, I just want to say that in my last video, there were some things I got miraculously right, and there were some things I got horribly wrong. And so I want to briefly go over those before we continue, just to clear the air a little bit about some of those things and get on with a good video. So to start off with, as far as I know still to this day, there's an 80 compute unit max on RDNA2. There's still ray tracing across the whole lineup. There is a 4K target, but I have more on that. There will be no more 4GB cards, and this is still labeled as Navi 2X. And as far as I know, also there will be, all the cards will be under 300 watts. Another couple of things I got right. There will be the 6000 naming scheme. I didn't know for sure, but I put it in there because it made sense with 5000 to 6000. New generation, was time for consistency in the marketing of things. So I did think that that was nice to have the naming scheme right. And there is some information I have on the memory that I also got correct that I'll be talking about in a little bit. So moving on from that, I want to discuss really quickly. There have been a lot of rumors going around about Big Navi, and a lot of things going around. I've heard a lot of different people say a lot of different things, and I want to give you my insight before diving into all these numbers here on what I think is going to happen with Big Navi. Big Navi will be better than the 5700, or not the 5700, the 3070. Big Navi will be better than the 3080, maybe slightly only, but it will be better than the 3080. Big Navi, if scaled correctly, can beat the 3090. So there is a lot of potential for where Big Navi may fall. Now, I think when people say Big Navi, they're referring, I think, to Navi 21. And the issue with that is Navi 21, there are 4 SKUs for that die. And we know the top SKU AMD is keeping for itself. The I think it's like the XLT. That is going to be AMD's. Same with the anniversary card for the 5700 XT. That's exactly what that SKU is. And that, I think, is where all the rumors are coming from of AMD's keeping top Navi. That's the top Navi they're keeping. So it's going to be much like the anniversary edition for the 5700 XT. Now, moving on, I think that Navi 21 is going to have 4 additional variants to that. So I think there's going to be a 6800, a 6800 XT, 6900, and a 6900 XT, and I'll get to more about the XTs in a minute. And I think that the 6800 lineup there, that's going to compete with the 3080. That might be a little worse than the 3080, or it might be a little better depending on how things go. But I think there's going to be a step above that it could compete very well with or beat the 3090. But I think more realistically, it's going to come between the 3080 and the 3090 and bridge that gap. So I do think that they are going to cover the whole product stack with Big Navi. Now, moving on with my specs. In the last video, biggest Navi, the 50 or what I deemed as the 6700 XT flagship, had 80 compute units, a 1950 megahertz base clock, 2200 megahertz boost clock. It had 22.5 teraflops. It was running on 5,120 stream processors. I stated there was going to be a 12 to 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 and on a 384 to 312 bit bus, and I'm going to get to all of that here. And then I put down at the bottom that there may be a 24 gigabyte variant and more on that. So I have a spreadsheet which I'm linking down in the description of all my numbers, so that way everyone can follow along and they can see I'm not just pulling these numbers out of anywhere. I have all the research done right here, located conveniently on this spreadsheet. So what I deemed as the 6700 XT flagship will now be the 6900 XT. And this card still keeps the same stream processors and compute units. It is still running on GDDR6 memory. However, and today I just had this confirmed, there will be a max of 256-bit memory bus. And the reason for that is AMD is doing something that I find to be pretty impressive that I don't think Nvidia has anything like, is they are utilizing something called Infinity Cache. And basically when the GPU is clocked high, that cache is going to speed up and it's going to essentially provide the same performance as a 384-bit bus. So I guess that's AMD's solution to the 3090. And this is more of a reason why I think there will be a card that will compete with the 3090 in their lineup, is why would they go for a card that we know is a 384-bit bus? Because I think the 3090 is the only one that has a 384-bit bus. I don't know why AMD would try to shoot for that level of performance if they're not going to compete with it. So that's piece of evidence number one for why AMD is going to be going across the whole product stack. Another thing we have confirmed is we know that there's going to be some sort of RDNA2 GPU with 16 gigabytes of memory. And that should be of no shock, as the Radeon 7 had 16 gigabytes of memory, and that was a Halo product from, I think, a year or two ago. So I would think today, especially with the high VRAM count Nvidia released, we would see a 16 gigabyte variant, and that has been confirmed in a leaked board. The clock speeds is really where things get interesting, and this is what's going to determine teraflops, and this is what I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, not only what made sense in performance, but also what made sense in what AMD would do. And so here are the numbers. I think that Big Navi will have a base clock of 75 megahertz over the 5700 XT, which will be 1975 megahertz, and a boost clock of the full potential of RDNA2 at 2300 megahertz. This will achieve 23.5 teraflops performance. Now, remember what I said about the Infinity Cache. The higher you clock the GPU, the faster it works. Therefore, if they want to achieve that 384-bit performance, I'm assuming they're going to have to clock this thing to the max. And we know RDNA2 is very efficient, so I think this is possible. Now, it may be 100 to 200 megahertz less, but I think best case scenario, we're going to see a 2300 megahertz boost clock. And part of the reason why I have it at this boost clock is because I think the lowest clock on the product stack will be at 1800 megahertz for the boost clock. So that only gives you so much range. I don't think AMD, I know on the RDNA 1 lineup, the clock speeds the boost clocks went down as the GPUs were lower in CU count. So I don't think that AMD would keep all the clock speeds at the same, and I don't think it'd be inverted because it just wouldn't make sense as far as teraflops and such go, and I'll explain that a little bit too. So that's why I'm calling for those clock speeds on biggest Navi. Now, we may not see that card at launch. There's going to be a variation. I think they're going to launch the regular non-XT cards first, and then I think when Nvidia releases their TI or TI models, they will release the XT versions as a counter to that. And I think by the time everything of that is out, we will already be seeing RDNA 3 starting to leak, and we will have that release coming up shortly. So I think that this is how this is going to play out over the next year and a half, 2 years with these cards. Looking at the 6900 XT, we're looking at 4,608 stream processors, 70 compute units. We are looking at the same 256-bit bus, GDR6 memory, 16 gigabytes. We're looking at a base clock of 1900 megahertz and a boost clock of 2200 megahertz, slightly less than the 6900 XT, but like I said, the clocks will be lower. There will be, that's how I view these. The XT models, the clocks will be either higher, there'll be a more unlocked die, or there'll be more memory. I don't think the memory bus is going to change at all because of the infinity cache, but the clock would remedy that, so that essentially would be, in a way, changing the memory bus. So, and we might see a combination of that. We might see one of those. It just depends upon the card, and it depends upon what AMD wants to do to achieve performance there. And anyways, back to the 6900 XT, we're looking at about 20 teraflops for this card. So about 3.5 teraflops less than biggest Navi. And I think when Nvidia will release 3090 Ti, or if they would release a Titan or something like that, this is if AMD would beat the 3090. I think this card, this extra 3.5 teraflops, would really be important for them to continue to be competitive with Nvidia. Now moving on to the cards that most of us would be looking at, and that is the 6800 series. This is going to compete with the RTX 3080, and I'm going to start off with the 6800. This has 4,096 stream processors, 64 compute units. It is GDR6 memory on a 256-bit bus. There are 12 gigabytes of that memory. We have a base clock of 1725 megahertz and a boost clock of 2150 megahertz for an all-in performance of 17.6 teraflops. And this is also based on the Navi 21 die. Then I think the card that will counter the 3080 Ti, which is the XT variation of this, is the 6800 XT with 4,352 stream processors, 68 CUs. We have, once again, 12 gigabytes of GDR6 memory on a 256 bit bus. We are looking at the same base clock and boost clock as the 6800, and we're looking at 18.7 teraflops of performance. So this is Navi 21. This is the big Navi die, and I think they're just going to keep cutting this die down, and they're going to lower memory to have 4 different GPUs out of that die, 4 different variations of GPUs on that die, and that would explain the 4 SKUs that were seen a couple months ago, I believe, that were released. The XLT, XT, XTX, there were a bunch of different endings on that. I think this is going to explain that. And like I said, I don't even know if AMD will hold only the top one. They might even hold the 6900 to themselves, and they might let AIBs produce the 6800 XT and down. So moving on to the card that everyone thinks would be Big Navi, and I'm going to explain why this card isn't going to be Big Navi, and a couple reasons why this card really just, it's It's too little to be big Navi. This is the 6700. It has 3,328 stream processors, 52 compute units, 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory, still 256-bit bus, and we are looking at a base clock of 1625 megahertz and a boost clock of 2000 megahertz, all in 13.3 teraflops on the Navi 22 die. And then the card that, at least to my knowledge, everyone is calling big Navi. This is regarding the Xbox. If you notice, the 6700 is basically a higher clocked Xbox. And that's because I think they've already done all the engineering on that chip. They already know it works. Why not just clock it a little higher? Because it would be a desktop card. You get an extra 1.3 teraflops out of it, and it's an easy win for AMD. Then the 6700 XT, which, like I said, this is what everyone's calling big Navi. 3,584 stream processors, 64 compute units, still 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory on a 256-bit bus. We're looking at a base clock of 1,765 megahertz and a boost clock of 2,090 megahertz for an all-in performance of just under 15 teraflops. And this card could be big Navi. They might never release. We don't know. We don't know what die the Xbox is on, though I do think it is on Navi 22. I don't think it's on Navi 21. I think AMD, when they emphasized an 80 CU limit, I don't think they would settle for, at the most, 52, 56 CUs. Now, these clock speeds. What I essentially did is I am taking clock speeds 100 megahertz, or not 100 megahertz, 10% higher than the previous generation. So I'm looking at least on the 5700 series, I'm looking at a 10% increase in clock speeds. So that's why I was able to get those numbers. And they are rounded. Some of them are tweaked a little bit to get a slightly bit of additional performance, but we know AMD is still in the process of tweaking things too, so it's not like for every card it will be a set 10%. Some might have a little more, some might have a little less there. And another thing I want to talk about too is these specs. When you look at them in the leaked board design there, the engineering sample, something has to give. The compute units and the high clocks and the memory, they're all going to draw a lot of power pushed to the very limit. So something essentially would have to give. And that's why I don't think they're going to do a 2300 megahertz 56 CU big Navi, because I think they're going to go more for the CUs and less for the clocks on those cards, personally. I don't think they're going to push it to the full limit. And like I said, the Xbox is, it's a 2080 Ti, essentially. That's an APU. And if we clock that higher, we're already getting a card better than a 2080 Ti. Now, I will warn you before I give you these numbers. These performance numbers are solely based off the teraflops in relation to the Xbox Series X. But I wanted to give you an idea of what I think this lineup could do. And if I'm correct, this would be a very good lineup. And this just shows the real power of RDNA2. And I do have to say that most architectures don't scale perfectly, so these numbers could be off, but I think it gives you a pretty good idea of what AMD is capable of if they really push themselves. So the 6700 is the card that at launch would compete with the 3070. That card is 10% faster than the 2080 Ti. We know the 3070 is a little bit faster than the 2080 Ti. So that card is either on par or slightly faster than the 3070. And another thing that we know, like I said, if we look at that memory bus there, that's 256 bit bus. And with the 3070 being at a 256-bit bus, then if we look at those clock speeds, they're rounding out at about 2000 megahertz. You could get a slightly higher memory performance there with that card. So it could perform well on both the graphical side of things and on the memory side of things. Now looking at the 6700 XT, which would be the counter to the 3070 Ti, which we know the Ti's are normally pretty good cards, we're looking at 24% better, 25% better than the 28 Ti. Now, this matches exactly up with the Nvidia killer, because AMD internally is saying, or we've heard, that Big Navi will be about 25%, at least 25% faster than the 2080 Ti. And we know that, like I said, these numbers aren't correct. These numbers are just based off teraflops in relation to the Xbox, but I think it'll give you a good idea of what these cards are capable of. And this might be the only card AMD is really showing off, or this may be Big Navi. There may be a card like this, and they might clock it up a little bit higher. That gets about 25 to 30% higher than the 2080 Ti. And like I said, the probability of that, I mean, it's going to be interesting. I mean, theoretically, if you would keep that card as the Big Navi, and you would clock it at the max of 2300 megahertz, you're looking at 16.48 teraflops. So if we do that and we look in relation to the Xbox, we're looking at a 37% gain in performance. Like I said, things don't scale perfectly, so that would round out to about 30% of performance. So that very well could be your Big Navi if they decided to. But I think they're going to go above that, and like I said, that's why I introduced the 6800 and 6900 series. Now, speaking of those cards, I've also done some math with those. The 6800 is 46% faster than the 2080 Ti. Now, we know that the 3080 is twice the performance of a 2080 Ti, or the 3080 is twice the performance of a 2080. 2080 is less in performance than a 2080 Ti. So this would make this would make some sense in my opinion. I think that this would work for the 6800 to effectively compete with the 3080. And then the 6800 XT is 10% more than that, and it is at 55% faster than the 2080 Ti. Now, Big Navi. This card, if everything scaled perfectly and if everything basically lined up with what I'm saying, and to an extent what I'm saying about teraflops in relation to the Xbox and how I'm calculating this is correct, the 6900 is 68% faster than the 2080 Ti. However, that is absolutely nothing compared to the 6900 XT, which is almost twice a 2080 Ti at 96% faster. So, and like I said, that card there, that's what I really am going to probably dub as a wish list card, because that is the ideal top Navi. I mean, the only thing I think they could do on top of that, we already know it's not going to go above 256-bit unless AMD is really messing with us, but I don't think they are. I truly think the Infinity Cache is real, and if they can reach 384-bit bus speeds, why would they put a bigger memory bus on top of that unless they're not using Infinity Cache, which at that point would just change everything up. So we're sticking with the Infinity Cache rumors, which I honestly believe are true. I know AMD has been trying to do different things like that with their mobile chips, and they've been showing strong interest in innovation in the past few years, and the little things like cache and the power, which that's another story I have about the power transfer between the CPU and GPU and the notebook APUs. There might be something like that coming to RDNA2 cards between the memory and the GPU chip. So that's a whole other thing that I might have to do a separate video on, but that is something AMD is definitely innovating now, and they're definitely going beyond just making a denser, more higher clock die with more memory. I think they're beyond those days. They're trying to innovate and fix the little things too and work more on the software side, which I'll speak about a little bit, just like Nvidia is doing. So I have more on the 6000 series. I'm actually going to cover 3 more SKUs that I think are going to exist, and I think that is the 6600 XT, 6600, and 6500 XT. The 6600 XT is on the Navi 23 die. It has 3072 stream processors, 48 CUs. It is 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory on a 192-bit bus, because I truly think at a card that low, you don't need to put a 256-bit bus. And if they still have some of that Infinity cache, it's probably not going to be 128 megabytes. They'll probably only be on top Navi, but they can still put some of that in there, and I think it'll help reach 256-bit bus performance. So I think that'll be the best route for AMD to go there. I think they're going to have a base clock of 1356 megahertz and a boost clock of 1875 megahertz with an all performance of 11.5 teraflops. And this card, if I am correct, should be about 18% faster than a 5700 XT and only 4% slower than a 2080 Ti. So this is still a very good card. And this card is going to be about at the $350 to $400 range. So for me, I really think that things they're starting to look up. And this card could even go as low as $300 in pricing. So, I mean, for $300, and you're going to get a card a little bit slower than the 2080 Ti, I find that to be remarkable. And like I said, it all comes down to, the clock speeds. And like I said, things aren't scaling perfectly, and they're not, all reliant on teraflops. But I think it's going to give you an idea that bottom line is this card's going to come really close to a 2080 Ti. And this will be the 3060 Ti competitor. The 6600, which has a familiar 2560 stream processors, 40 compute units, same memory, 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 on that 192-bit bus, and it will share the same clock speeds as the 6600 XT, and it will have 9.6 teraflops. It is 20% slower than the 2080 Ti and just 2% slower, which, like I said, it's really so close that the bottom line I'm going to give here is 2% slower than the 5700 XT, but the bottom line is you're going to get a 5700 XT, a $400 to $450 GPU for about $200 to $250. That's how good RDNA2 is. You're going to essentially have the same specs, and if they would clock it a little higher, if they would clock it at 1950 megahertz, and that Infinity cache does do what I think it'll do, and it can emulate the 256-bit bus, and it'll have about the same performance as that, you're going to get literally a 5700 XT for the price of 5600. So this is an amazing leap in performance, and like I said, this lineup is going to be very impressive, and I really can't wait to see how it evolves as it's released for the next year, starting on October 28th, which, by the way, I will be covering that stream. The final card I want to mention is the 6500 XT. It has 2004 stream processors and 36 compute units. This is the same die, I think, that the PlayStation 5 is based off. Once again, same thing with the Xbox. Why would AMD go back and try to re-engineer a whole new die when they can take one they've already engineered, they've already proven to work, they can change the memory up a little bit, they can increase the clock speeds, which in this case the clock speeds are decreased. I'm going to explain that a little bit, and perfect. You have a really nice working card. This card, I think, will have anywhere from 6 to 8 gigabytes. I know there will not be 4 gigabytes. I don't know about 6. which, to be honest, 6 gigabytes is still a lot of memory for a card that's probably going to be about $200, $175. I mean, you're essentially, with this card, you're looking at 1300 megahertz base clock, 1800 megahertz boost clock, 8.29 teraflops. You're looking at a card that's still faster than a 5700. And I mean, the 5700 is $400, $350. And this card here is going to be about $175, $200. So do the math. It's a really, really good buy for an entry-level GPU. And I think this card is really going to put the 500 series, the 590, 570, and 580s to bed. I think they're going to be basically obsolete in terms of performance and value after this card. So this card here, if we would fully clock it at the 2300 megahertz that the PlayStation 5 has, we're getting 10.5 teraflops. Now, if we clocked out, like I said, the clock speeds have to be super close between all these variants, and they're already very close. They're only about 50 megahertz to 100 megahertz apart. This card would be more between the 6600 and 6600 XT, and then in that case, those clocks have to be higher, and it wouldn't make much sense to have a higher clock card. And this is an entry-level card. It's not supposed to pull a lot of power. It doesn't need to pull a lot of power, and this isn't being used as heavy as the PlayStation 5 APU is. So this card here, I mean, it's still amazing. You saw how well the 5500 XT did. I think this card is going to do a lot better than that card, being that there's such an increase in performance, and there's an insanely good value tagged on with that. And this card, just to compare, is 31% slower than a 2080 Ti, and it is 15% slower than a 5700 XT. Now, I can't do this for the 6800 and 6900 series, but I created a column that is the versus RDNA1 variant. There is supposed to be a 50% IPC gain. We now know that to be a 60% IPC gain. You can check out Red Gaming Tech. They did a video on that. Fantastic video. And he said that there will be a 60% IPC increase. And my numbers are proving just that. So for the 6700 XT, in comparison to the 5700 XT, we see a 54% increase. And like I said, these are all based on teraflops, but it's corroborating with those numbers. And I'm finding with this, a lot of people are saying, well, you don't know the official specs or whatever, but the thing is a lot of my research corroborates with the rumors going around and a lot of the confirmed specs. So I'm pulling these numbers. I'm not just creating numbers off the top of my head thinking this would make a cool GPU. I'm pulling numbers that realistically make sense based on the information we have. And while, yes, no one does have official CU counts, no one has official memory counts, no one has the entire product stack confirmed memory bus, no one has confirmed clocks or teraflops, we can kind of guesstimate some of these numbers here based on the rumors and get what is, in my opinion, a similar card to what may be released in the upcoming generation. Now, the 6700, and like I said, some cards, just like Red Gaming Tech said, some cards are going to be 60% IPC. We could see a little bit less than that. We can see more than that. It's not like it's a set number. This card here we're seeing is, let me correct myself there. The IPC gain is about 60%, but it could be more, it could be less, and it may be specific to the card. He did not say that. It may be specific to the card. But the 6700, we're seeing a 67% increase from the 6700 to 5700. And that's one generation. And this card is 67% faster. The 6600 XT is 60% faster than the 5600 XT. The 6600, or that is 60% faster, and the 6600 is 50% faster than the 5600 XT, and the 6500 XT is 59% faster than the 5500 XT. So all in all, we're seeing numbers at about 60% there. So all in all, when you look at the data here, like I said, it corroborates with what we know. You know, I just took those numbers real quick, averaged them out. It's getting a 50% is the total there. So 60%, 58% is not far from 60%. So that would make sense, you know, as far as the IPC increase we'd see on these cards. Now, another thing I want to note is there is a possibility Big Navi maybe 24 gigabytes. Like I said, this is all going to depend upon how high they want to go and the competition here. How far up NVIDIA's product stack do they want to compete? Do they want to compete with a flagship? They did state Big Navi was a flagship, a Halo project. We know the 3080 is a flagship. Whether AMD knew NVIDIA was going to call the 3080 a flagship is a whole different deal. But it could mean they're going after the 3080. It could mean they're going after the 3090. I'll tell you for sure, a flagship product is not going after a mid-range card. The 5700 XT was not a flagship card. It was a flagship card in the sense of its revolutionary architecture and performance for the value, but it was not a flagship card in a sense that it dominated other cards or it was something with insane specs and performance never been seen before in the AMD lineup. And a Halo product, I'm going to pull up here, and I'm going to include this in the video, the Radeon 7. And this card I know was a very good compute card, but it wasn't good for many things other than that. So I'm not sitting here saying this was a great card, but I am going to compare the specs. So we see here Radeon 7, 60 compute units. Right away we know if it's going to be a Halo product, it's got to beat this card. And that means it has to get over 60 CUs. Even more than that, I know the Vega 64 is 64 CUs, so we know it has to be over 64 CUs. So this is where I'm saying it's going to, at least in my opinion, go up to the 6800 XT. If my CU counts are correct, it's going to go up to the 6800 XT. Now, with that being said, the clock speeds are higher than the Radeon 7. It includes the same memory, so we're not losing anything. But like I said, there may be, you know, depending upon the variant, it may be a 24 gigabyte variant. This is on HBM2 memory, but like I said, AMD is trying something completely new with their Infinity Cache, which could ultimately change the memory, even though we know it's almost confirmed that Big Navi is going to be on GDR6. So there are some rumors floating around about HBM2E. If it would truly be a Halo product like the Radeon 7, I think it would be on HBM2E. I think it would have, if the Infinity Cache really is as good as it says, then definitely still a 256-bit bus. But, you know, with a 24 gigabyte variant, it may be on a 320-bit bus. And I think from there, you know, we would be able to see a card that would really do well in comparison to the Radeon 7 and the 3090. Like I said, it just all depends upon how far they're looking at going. Now, that's enough AMD. I want to talk about the 3070 Ti. There has been a leak by Lenovo, and which they showed there was a 3070 Ti 16 gigabyte. And I'm going to explain why you are not going to see a consumer card 16 gigabyte 3070 Ti. Simple thing is, it's an OEM card. The reason for this, Lenovo, as we know, is one of AMD, not AMD's, well, they are AMD's, but they are also NVIDIA's partners, and they use NVIDIA GPUs in their pre-built computers. We know that these OEMs, they sometimes get parts like Apple, where Apple gets AMD GPUs that are exclusively for Apple. They never make it to market. We know with the Ryzen 4000 APUs, those were OEM only. Those never, or at least have not yet, made it to market. They are solely in pre-built computers. You cannot go to the store and buy one off a shelf alone. So And the reason for this is it's really not so much that I've ever heard anyone say it's going to be an OEM, but just using common sense, I think. And I'm not saying this to say that other people don't know what they're talking about, because there's basically every other tech tuber on the planet saying there's going to be a 16 gigabyte 3070 Ti. I'm simply saying that as a consumer and as someone who gets excited over graphics cards, 16 is greater than 10. The 3070 we know will be somewhat probably faster or more unlocked than the 3070. We know the 3070 Ti is probably have to have more memory than the 3070. But if we get 16 gigabytes of memory on the 3070 Ti and we get 10 gigabytes of memory on the 3080, and the speed of it, the speed of the overall GPU is going to be about close to a 3080, I would say, or it's going to be better than a 3070, but a little bit less than a 3080. But it has 6 gigabytes more of memory. A lot of people are going to end up buying the 3070. Now, mind you, this is for AIBs too. This wouldn't just be an Nvidia exclusive card. This would be used by AIBs. So AIBs are still going to be selling. There's a whole thing with a shortage on Nvidia's Founder Edition cards, which many believe to be planned. But AIBs are still going to be selling 3080s. If you release a card like this, you're effectively going to cannibalize the 3080. I mean, it's not going to make any sense to buy it. Most people are going to see the 16 gigabytes, and that's going to trump the 3080 and the 80 is greater than 70 thing that's going off in their mind. They're going to look at the VRAM and think, well, one's a branding number and one's an actual specification. I'm going with the actual specification. And I think another thing is these CUDA cores. Everyone's talking about the CUDA core counts, but NVIDIA didn't really talk about them much, and that's because basically they re-engineer the way that CUDA cores are processing data and the way they are built. And so essentially they are double the CUDA cores, but not technically double the CUDA cores, so they couldn't really come out and say that. So that's why they didn't really mention that in the launch back in September 1st. So people aren't really looking at CUDA cores, and I think they're mainly going to be looking, especially in a generation where all of a sudden we're seeing this huge addition of VRAM. They're going to be looking at the VRAM, and I don't think that a 16 gigabyte 3070 is going to do well in the NVIDIA ecosystem with a 3080 above it, because it would make no sense to have a 3070 priced above a 3080, because we know the 2080 Ti was priced insanely higher than a 2080, but there was nothing past that but a Titan, and that wasn't in the 20 series branding. It wasn't anything that could really compare, and the 2080 Ti was still slower than the Titan, so it wasn't like that was an issue like we are seeing here. But if you would release a 3070 Ti with 16 gigabytes of VRAM and then a 3080 with less VRAM, it's not going to make any sense. And you can't charge a 3070 more than a 3080, because then that would confuse the product stack, and it's going to create so many issues with the lineup that I don't see why NVIDIA would release something like that. So here's what I think. There's going to be an OEM only 3070 Ti 16 gigabytes. Most definitely, if there's going to be a Ti, I will tell you there's going to be a 3070 Ti. It's going to be either slightly more unlocked, slightly clocked higher, or both from the 3070, and it will be priced between the 3070 and 3080. There may be a card with 9 gigabytes of VRAM, get an extra gigabyte of VRAM. There may be a card with 2 gigabytes of extra VRAM, but slower, and maybe not by much, but slower than the 3080. So it still can justify the 3080's pricing and existence in NVIDIA's lineup. So that is my thoughts on the 3070 Ti that everyone has been talking about, and why I think it will be an OEM-only card. Another bit of NVIDIA news. NVIDIA is moving forward on a deal to buy ARM for $38 billion. And this deal isn't so much a problem for AMD as it is for Intel. Now, I've been saying for a while, Intel's basically it's just Intel is in a very, very bad place. And I think one of the biggest reasons for this is everyone's saying that AMD is going to do what they did to Nvidia with, just like they did things to Intel with the CPU business. That's not the case. Here's why. Nvidia listens to their customers. Nvidia provides products they know people want and will use. And while Nvidia, yes, their pricing is a bit insane sometimes and such, they do have a good feature set. Intel, on the other hand, does not listen to their customers. They will hold workshops and such, and they will pretend like they are listening to you, but they really aren't. They really, at the end of the day, don't care. They only care about numbers. And that's why they're having so many issues with what they're doing. And I'm telling you straight off, all Intel has been doing for the last 4 or 5 years is renaming stuff. And plain and simple, stop renaming freaking USB connectors. That is the only thing Intel has done revolutionary in the last 5 years is Thunderbolt. And all it is renamed connectors. That's it. It's just a renamed USB connector. Someone's told me it essentially functions the same as USB-C. So what in the world? What is Intel even thinking at this point? I mean, they're literally renaming USB connectors. They renamed FinFET to SuperFin to seem like they're innovating. They're not. And 14 nanometer, that's just been a mess. There's supposed to be 10 nanometer coming out, but like I said, we've been on 14 nanometer so long. 14 nanometer may very well be the last node Intel produces for a consumer. I mean, it's looking like that at this point. They can't seem to get anything to work down there. And TSMC is packed as far as their capacity, and they're certainly not going to let Intel in. If they do, it's not going to be much at all. And AMD already is locked in. We know this from Nvidia. AMD and Apple are basically going to control most of the availability at TSMC. Nvidia is going to get whatever's left, and then Intel is just going to be left to scrape at the very last bits. And they're not going to be getting the superior nodes. They're not going to be getting, the enhanced. I mean, Apple has a custom node. AMD has a custom node. Intel's never going to get that. They're going to be, at this point, there's so many nodes far behind AMD, it's unreal. There's absolutely no way I think Intel's going to catch up in the next decade at least. And to be very honest, especially with the path Intel's going on right now, Intel's going to be your next IBM. And all companies at one point are probably going to be like this. I don't think Nvidia is going to be around forever. I don't think AMD is going to be around forever. And IBM still exists, mind you. But IBM is not as prevalent as it once was back in the day. It's run its course. But I'll tell you one thing, at least IBM can innovate still. They have Watson. And Intel has renamed USB ports. So unless Intel really figures something out, then I don't see them going anywhere. But this ARM deal, back to Nvidia, is going to be super problematic for Intel because this was the only thing they really had any hope with was ARM. This was the only thing they had somewhat of an edge on AMD with was ARM. And with Nvidia buying ARM, saying specifically we are going to be going after Intel, whether that means Nvidia is going to create their own CPU, APU line, or whether they're going to try to partner with AMD to basically finish Intel once and for all. We know for sure Intel is not going to do well with that transaction between SoftBank and Nvidia for the acquisition of ARM. So Intel's days are numbered. You can change my mind. I feel free to debate me in the comments down below. I love talking in the comments. I'm absolutely thrilled. I try to answer every one of your comments, even if they're terribly against this channel or 100% for it. I always try to get back with you and such, and to have that discussion, to continue discussion in the video there. So feel free to leave that down in the comments, and we can talk about that more. But that's really where I stand on the whole Intel, Nvidia, ARM deal. And then the final bit of information is Nvidia's DLSS. And I really like AMD, but I will have to give Nvidia credit on some things. The coolers for this 3000 series are nothing short of impressive. They are absolutely amazing, and I saw that and instantly thought, why can't AMD do something like this? Because the thing is, even though AMD is getting rid of blower style coolers, I don't think they're ever going to make something that look that good. At least not anytime in the near future. They just aren't. And frankly, that's probably the best cooler design I've ever seen. And I'm not one. I don't really like the angular, coolers with all the fans showing, and these are the ones that are like super curvy with weird coloration and stuff. It was perfect. It was a sleek, modern design. It didn't show just a ton of fans, and it cooled the GPU very, very well. The only issue I had with it was the power connector. Was the placement of that was absolutely terrible, but they really didn't have too many choices. I guess the only thing I wish they would do is I wish they'd create some sort of mod on it where there would be an extension, like a hard plastic extension for that. It would cover up the GeForce logo on that card, but I think it would be a lot nicer to have a big plastic piece, or a plastic that would match the actual card and not the power supply cables. That would extend along the front of that card, and then you can hook your cable up to that. But that's my one little bit of advice on that. But overall, it's an amazing cooler, and I absolutely love the design. And I think that Nvidia made a very good choice there. Another thing, ray tracing, RDNA2. RDNA2's ray tracing just simply isn't going to beat Nvidia's, but I mean, they've had a generation above them, so that is expected. In my opinion, it'll be better than Turing, but not as good as Ampere. So it's going to be kind of in the middle, is what I'm estimating for that, which is still very good for their first generation. They have time to catch up and stuff. It's not like ray tracing's been around forever. It's only been around really for the 2000 series at Nvidia. So I'm not too worried about that. And then DLSS. DLSS 2.0 is amazing. I will give it credit, especially as someone who works in the 3D rendering, visualization, photorealistic imagery line of things. It's amazing. But AMD will have something for that. Whether it will be at launch, I don't know. Whether it will be, October 28th or next year, I know there's going to be something. And AMD has been quoted to say that they are taking DLSS very seriously, and they should, because if not, Nvidia will use that against them. Just like Nvidia used ray tracing against AMD, they are going to use DLSS against AMD. So AMD knows they have to figure out something, and I think they are either in the process of doing that, they're refining it, or they already have something like that done, and they're just waiting to unveil it. And we can prove this just simply because AMD has hired so many people to their software development department recently that they are definitely planning something big. Some of that we can contribute to the drivers, though, and this is something Ampere was the Ampere launch was rushed, and we can see it was a little bit more hastily done than in years past. And I think AMD's taking the extra month, 2 months technically, to really make sure they can get the most performance out of the cards with the clock speeds, because this is going to be a neck and neck race now. This isn't just trying to compete for the mid, and this is competing against the whole product stack. So they're really going to try to get those clock speeds as high as they can and as stable as they can. And I think they're really going to invest a lot of time and money into their drivers and making sure they have amazing, stable drivers that, remember, good drivers can also help with increasing performance. So they really want to be able to have good drivers on these cards so that they can start the cards with good drivers and by the end have amazing drivers, unlike RDNA1, which I'll say I never had any issues with my 5700 XT. But RDNA started off with mediocre, sometimes problematic drivers, and now has good drivers. So we want these next generation drivers to be much better. I think they will be. So all in all, that is what I have regarding AMD, regarding Nvidia, regarding the latest tech news, some bits about ARM. I just threw that in simply because that's breaking news today, and I figured I would include that. But most of this video has been about RDNA2 and how we'll compete with Ampere and how the October 28th launch will look. Like I said, I do plan on covering that launch. I will provide more details as time continues. The Ampere launch, YouTube, basically I activated everything, and apparently you have to go in and click live stream for it to activate live streaming, which a year ago you didn't. So that was why I was unable to do that. So I recorded it. and I posted that immediately after the launch was over. So you can go check out that video. I will link that in the description below. But like I said, I'm just trying to provide the best the content for you guys. Let me know what you guys' thoughts are. Let me know what you think about these specs. Like I said, I'm including everything in the spreadsheet. Let me know what you think of the video. Let me know what you think of the new recording and the audio quality. What's your thoughts on Ampere? What's your thoughts on RDNA2? What do you think about my characterization of Intel? I know I'm going to get some people that aren't going to be so happy about that. I know I'm going to have some people down there in the chat saying, amen, he has been correct. And let me know what your thoughts are, what you expect and what card you're looking to, get here. I mean, I've had my eyes on, big Navi for a long time. And frankly, I've told myself, whatever the biggest one is, I'm going to set a goal to get it. So, and if I would be able to get that card, I would definitely be able to really make some amazing things with it. Like I said, I do a lot of photorealistic visualization work, so I'd be able to make some really crazy realistic images off that card, and I cannot wait one day to have the opportunity to do something like that. So thank you all for watching this video. Thank you all for supporting the channel. Please like, subscribe, and ring that bell. That will be able to tell you that I have posted new content. Please share this with your friends, with anyone who you may know who'd be interested, and I will see you on the next one.